Now, I told you that there are a host of techniques that you can employ once you have full optical access. What are those techniques? So, there are many techniques, I will just name them and then we will study them one by one in this lecture and in the next lecture. So, first and very important technique is called particle imaging velocimetry. There is second technique which is called scattering, basically it is like imaging, okay. Imaging is scattering, okay. And this scattering is of three types. One is Mie scattering, Raman scattering and Rayleigh scattering, okay. Then you know there is self emission spectroscopy, there is a laser induced fluorescence, there is a planar laser induced fluorescence called PLIF, then laser induced incandescence, then laser holography and laser Doppler velocimetry. All these techniques are used for one thing or the other in the internal combustion engines for understanding one phenomenon or the other, right. For example, if you want to understand particulate formation inside the engine combustion chamber, so far without the optical diagnostic, what do? You run the engine and in the exhaust you put some kind of a probe, take the exhaust sample into your opacimeter, understand what kind of opacity it has, or take the sample, pass it through a filter paper under controlled condition and then measure the particulate weight. So, you get gravimetric measurement of the particulate. So, it tells you a bulk, it does not tell you in which part of the combustion chamber, at what location, at what crank angle degree particulates are being formed the maximum. It just tells you bulk, that okay, in 100 cycles this is the particulate that is forming, or this is the particulate that is being formed and this is causing that much opacity. So, very bulk, very high level information comes out from general information. Laser induced incandescence is a technique which can tell you crank angle by crank angle where the particulates are being formed, okay. So, these techniques are extremely important, they give you time resolved information in a cycle about different things. So, first I will discuss with you particle imaging velocimetry. So, as the name says, velocimetry means you want to look at the air flow, where inside the combustion chamber, because air flow inside the engine combustion chamber is extremely important because it affects the fuel air mixing process. But unfortunately, can you see air flow inside here in this room? The answer is no, but the air is flowing. So, how do you look at it? How do you know that air is flowing in the first place? Look at this beamer, okay. The light is passing through these beams and you can see some particles hanging around and they are moving. So, that tells you that there is air movement inside. You can't see the air, but you can see the particles. Particles are close to your nose also. Everywhere it is the same density particle, it is not that the particles are there only, but you are not able to see the particles close to your nose or close to your proximity. You are able to see particles only in that position. Why? Why does it happen? Because the light intensity is high enough that these small particles scatter enough light which can be captured by your camera eye, okay. So, illumination therefore is extremely important. Close to your nose or close to your vicinity, the light intensity is not enough and therefore, you can't see the particles. So, basically in PIV we understand the flow inside a engine combustion chamber by seeing the particles, by imaging the particle, and that is why it is called particle imaging velocimetry. So, PIV is used for very important investigations inside IC engines. So, basically what is an PIV? What is a PIV? PIV is a technique which studies the flow of the fluids, in this particular case inside the internal combustion engines. And how do you do it? The flow is illuminated with double pulse light sheet and the position of the large number of tracer particles are recorded with a photographic camera viewing normal to the plane. Very simple technique. What you are doing is you make a laser sheet. Okay. Suppose I have a flow here, this is my flow. So, what I am doing is, suppose this is my channel, I am making a light sheet. So, when I make a light sheet, all the particles in this plane will get illuminated, and I take an image orthogonally. This is the light sheet, I take the image from here. Okay. So, I shine the light once, I take the image, then I shine the light again, after certain time I capture the image again. So, now if there is some particle at some location, within that delta t time it would move to another location. If I can identify that this was initial position and that is the final position, I know what is the distance it has travelled, delta s, I know the direction and I know what is delta t. So, if I divide delta s by delta t, I get the velocity and I know the direction. So, for every point I am able to get the velocity vectors in a flow field. So, whatever area I am illuminating, I am able to get velocity vectors in entire flow field. Okay. So, this is, if you have understood this, you have understood the PIV, rest of it is just a story, okay, details of it. So, basically I will read it again. The flow is illuminated with double pulse light sheet and the position of large number of tracer particles. Tracer particles means the particles that you put in the flow, so that you can visualize it, are recorded with a photographic camera viewing normal to the plane. So, this is important, that the plane and the camera have to be at 90-degree angle. What are the advantage of PIV? See, if there is a flow, right. Suppose for example, let me ask you this question. If there is a flow of a river, how do you measure? So, flow of a river of velocity at different points, how do you measure? Pitot tube, you use pitot tube. Pitot tube is a point measurement. Wherever velocity you want, you put the pitot tube there, and then the kinetic energy, the velocity is converted into head, pressure head, and then you measure that, and that gives you the velocity of the water at that point, right. And if you want it in a section, you have to keep moving that from one point to other. But then, since you are moving, you can't do simultaneous measurement all over the place. So, you are doing it here at this point, after 1 minute there will be at another place, after 1 minute there will be another place. Maybe by the time you go there, this velocity will change. So, simultaneous measurement is impossible with pitot tube. Okay. In a airflow, you do hot wire anemometry. Hot wire anemometry is also a point measurement. This is not simultaneous measurement. In this case, and then hot wire anemometry, you have to put the wires. So, this disturbs the flow. This is intrusive technique. Pitot tube is also intrusive technique. When you use an intrusive technique, you are actually disturbing the flow. Okay. Suppose you want to measure a supersonic flow, and if you insert something in supersonic flow, it is going to disturb the flow royally. Okay. So, what is really required is to have non-intrusive techniques, and PIV is one such non-intrusive technique, because here we are not inserting any physical object in the flow, we are only inserting a light sheet. And is the light sheet going to obstruct the flow or disturb the flow? Answer is no. So, it is called non-intrusive technique. Okay. Then you can do 2D and 3D full flow measurement that can be made. You can measure the velocity in 2 dimensions, and also you can measure the velocity in 3 dimensions. So, when you capture the image using PIV, you can find the particle velocity in x direction, y direction, and using some technique you can even do 3 dimensions. So, you can find out z component of the velocity as well. Okay. And what you need to do is, suppose there is a section, you can capture the image for the entire section, and suppose at some point you only need a very small area to be interrogated, you can just interrogate that small area. Suppose next day you think that okay, I need to interrogate another area, you do not need to repeat the experiment, just pull out the files from your computer and interrogate another area. So, that is another advantage. Then instantaneous velocity fields are obtained. This is one technique where entire section is captured at one moment instantaneously. So, this is one big plus, and then you can study even the multi-phase flows. For example, if you are having a water flow with bubbles, air bubbles in it, it is a multi-phase flow. A wet steam, for example, is also a multi-phase flow. Those can be actually also studied using them. In fact, it is easier to study them, because multi-phase flows, you know, even if there is a water flow and there are bubbles in it, you do not need to seed it. The bubbles itself is going to scatter the light and do the job for you, right. So, your life becomes simpler in case of studies of multi-phase flows. Okay. So, PIV can actually be used for many applications such as single or multi-phase channel flows, steam bubble collapse, flow around cylinders in channel. Lot of work is done in IIT Kanpur mechanical engineering on flow around different types of cylinders. You have circular cylinder, you have hexagonal cylinder and all that. So, lot of simulation and experimental studies are done. We are experts in the particles, droplets or bubbles, any of these things. So, what you do in an engine, you seed the intake air with graphite particles. Graphite is carbon, you can see them, they have very good reflectivity. So, when they come inside, they scatter good amount of light, and when the combustion takes place, they burn away. Even if they do not burn away and if they stick to the walls, they do not cause too much of a harm to the optical line, and they are soft material. Okay. So, that is why graphite particles are preferred. You can also use olive oil droplets. So, you have devices by which you can create droplets of very small size of olive oil. You can seed the flow, when they come inside the combustion chamber, whenever the combustion takes place, they burn away. So, this can happen. Then you need double pulse laser, 2 laser pulses which illuminate these particles with short time difference. So, you need very quick, very fast pulse lasers. Okay. Then you need light sheet optics. Now, if you look at the light that comes out of laser, it is normally in cylindrical form, a 5 millimeter diameter, 6 millimeter diameter, 10 millimeter diameter. So, if you put a circular beam through the flow, you will not get any information. So, what you need to do is you need to convert into a very thin sheet of light. So, from a circular beam to a thin sheet which is about half millimeter to 1 millimeter thick, right, that is done by light optics, sheet light optics. So, light is formed into a thin light plane guided into the flow medium, and then you need CCD cameras. So, if you are using 2D PIV, only one CCD camera is enough. If you are using 3D PIV, you need minimum 2 cameras, right. If you are using tomographic PIV, you can do it with 2, you can also do it with 4 cameras. So, a fast frame transfer CCD captures 2 frames exposed by laser pulses, and then once this images have been captured, finally what you need is you need a software which combine these 2 images, and you can then there are a lot of processing involved, and it tells you finally the information about velocity of the flow field that you want to look at. It can only be done using software, you cannot do it manually in a realistic flows. Reason is that if you look at any image of any flow field, especially inside the IC engines, there will be thousands or maybe 100,000 particles that you capture. And if you just look at with your naked eye, every particle will look the same. So, you will not be able to identify which particle has moved to which direction, right. So, that is done by statistical correlation methods which are built into the software. Software identifies the numbers are so high, number of particles is so high, it is not possible to do it manually. Okay. So, there are specialized softwares which calculate the velocity of each particle, and then they make the velocity vector map for the flow field that you are interested in. This is just a simple arrangement for a wind tunnel. This is not related to engine right now. I will just first show you what a PIV is, then we will apply it to engines. So, PIV is a technique for measurement of instantaneous planar velocity fields. Here you see you have a laser sheet. This is the wind tunnel, and this section of the wind tunnel you have made transparent by putting perspex sheet or glass sheets. So, flow is not disturbed, and this is basically a rectangular cross section. Okay. So, there is no funda of curvature, effect of curvature on the images. Okay. So, this is very simple arrangement just to understand. So, you have a laser sheet optics, which is nothing but a combination of lenses. So, the circular beam is then converted into very thin light sheet, and this light sheet is going to illuminate the flow field. So, you are adding the particles here. So, this flow is seeded with the tracer particles, and when it passes through the sheet, the particles will be illuminated. They will scatter light, and you have this camera here. This is the camera. So, you take one image at time t, another image at time t plus delta t. Okay. So, what will happen is that suppose this is the location of particle number 1, this is the location of particle 2 and particle 3 in the first image. After time delta t, obviously these particles are moving in the flow, right. So, they would have moved to another location. So, this is the second location of particle 1, second location of particle 2, the second location of particle 3. Now, you have a software that is going to combine this image with this image and identify that this is particle 1, this is particle 1, this much direction it has moved, in this direction it has moved by this much distance, in this much time. And this is what happens with the second, this is what has happened with the third. And then finally, it will give you a vector map for this area. Clear? If there is any confusion, this is the basic fundamental of particle imaging velocimetry technique. If there is any problem, you can ask me now. Oh, I will come to that. Particle can certainly move perpendicular to the plane. So, what you do is that you basically adjust the frame speed such that you do not allow it to move into the out of the plane, because once the particle goes out of the plane, it will be seen in the first image, it will not see in the second image. So, it will be lost, you do not use that, software will not use that data. So, basically if you want to avoid that, the frame speed should be adjusted such that if it is too fast, what will happen? It will not move significant distance. If you have too much of time difference between these two, the particle will move out of plane. So, you have to basically optimize, and there is no set procedure for this. This PIV is a matter of practice. You have to keep on doing the experiments, keep on making mistakes and learn it from your experience. That is how you perfect it. Okay, there is no set thumb rule that okay, this flow only this frame speed you have to operate the camera, only this frequency you have to operate the laser. This you have to learn by experience, by making mistakes. Okay. So, an optical imaging technique is used to measure the fluid properties or flow velocity vectors and many points in the flow field simultaneously, say thousands of points or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of points simultaneously, which is not possible by any other technique. Measurement in 2 or 3 components of the velocity usually made in planar slices of the flow field. So, you are taking one slice at a time, you can make another planar slice, and that way you can even do it, you can move the planes. Accuracy and spatial resolution of this technique is compared to laser Doppler velocimetry and hot wire anemometry. So, this is pretty accurate and pretty precise, spatial resolution is very good. So, this animation actually tells the same story which I showed you in a figure. This is an aerofoil, we are interested in looking at flow across the aerofoil, flow vector across the aerofoil. So, you have this laser and this is the sheet optics. So, once the sheet optics come, this is the zone that is illuminated, this is the seeded flow that is coming, and you are capturing through this camera two images. This is first image, this is the second image. When you put it through a cross correlation statistical method through a software, you can identify what is the location at time t equal to t and time t equal to t plus delta t, and you do the auto correlation or cross correlation method, and finally what you get is this kind of a image. So, you will know what is the flow across a aerofoil shape. So, this is just one simple example explaining what PIV looks like. Okay. I think I have already explained it to you. Suppose this is the flow field and you are interested in this small area only. You have captured this whole image, but you are interested only in this area. So, you will magnify this and you will identify the first location and the second location. So, it will give you delta y, it will give you delta x, you know what is the delta t between the two images, and then you can figure out the velocity component in x direction, velocity component in y direction. This is 2D PIV. Okay. So, this is the interrogation region basically in two images that you capture, you apply the cross correlation method, this kind of a vector map comes out. This is the final outcome that you get for this particular interrogation region. You have to apply cross correlation methods. So, I have already mentioned it to you, this is how a typical optical system looks like for PIV measurement. So, this is the flow cylinder. Now, this flow cylinder, when you want to do IC engine measurement, instead of this optical plastic cylinder, you can have a optical engine cylinder. Okay. Rest of the things remain same. So, here you have a pipe through which the flow is coming and you are measuring the flow inside this cylinder, and this is the laser, and this is the optical arrangement for making the light sheet, and you can see this light sheet cuts through the cylinder, and then here these are two cameras means 3D PIV. Okay. This is another example. So, you have this laser, light optics, you have one sheet, and this is 2D PIV, flow is taking place inside this cylinder. So, you need an illumination source, you need an optical system for illuminating the test section, you need digital imagers for capturing the flow field. Digital imager means cameras. You need a system for image processing, particle identification, particle tracking, and velocity vector cleaning. So, basically when you do the cross correlation, there are a lot of spurious vectors, wrong information, wrongly identified, even the software makes a mistake, it is not 100% proof. So, you have to then manually clean up and clean the vectors. So, this is called vector field cleaning. Okay. The laser is synchronized with cameras and the light sheet is positioned to illuminate the test volume. Scattered light from the tracer particle is recorded with the digital camera, and then the image analysis is performed. Okay. Now, you see if this is very important slide which tells you the general aspects of PIV. This is not related to just IC engines, but to all aspects. Okay. So, first general aspect is that this technique is extremely important because it is a non-intrusive velocity measurement. Okay. You are not intruding into the flow field at all and you are doing simultaneous measurement. Then the other general aspect is that it is an indirect velocity measurement. What does that mean? It means that you are not actually measuring the airflow velocity, you are actually measuring the velocity of particles. And it is not necessary that particles will have the same velocity as that of flow. You would like to have the same velocity of the particles as the flow, but then the air has some density. The particles, if the particles have the same density as air, then they will faithfully follow the flow, but if the density of the particles is more, then there will be some lag, right, between the flow velocity and particle velocity. So, therefore, the choice of the material for the particles become extremely important. You always try to take the particles which are lighter and whose density is not very different from air. That is why you do not go for, if you just put iron dust particle for example, can you use it for seeding the PIV flows? The answer is no, because the density of difference will be very, very large. So, you put very light materials such as graphite materials, such as titanium oxide powders, these are very light, low density materials, and they faithfully follow the flow, especially in case of air flows. So, I will tell you, we have a list of particles which are recommended for air flows, we have a list of particles which are recommended for liquid flows. Obviously, we do not study metal flows, molten metal flows using PIV, you can't see through it, right. So, only liquid flows and transparent liquid flows and transparent air flows are measured using PIV. Then you know it is a whole field technique. Whole field technique means you illuminate the entire flow field and you capture it at one point in time. And as I mentioned, you can then interrogate a very small area. Interrogate means bring the data related to that small part into the computer for further processing. So, if in this flow field, if I am interested in only finding out the velocity in this small zone, I do not need to do the calculations for everything, because it will going to take a lot of time, computing time. I can just ask my computer to calculate only the small area. Okay. So, it is a whole field technique where you can recall small area of interest for further processing. Suppose tomorrow I am interested in this area as well, I do not need to repeat the experiment, the same area, same image, that particular section can be used for interrogation again. I have already mentioned that there is a velocity lag between the velocity of the particles and velocity of the flow. So, the density should be as small as possible. I have also discussed briefly about the illumination levels. So, illumination levels should be illumination levels are actually related to the particle size. So, if you have smaller particle, you need higher illumination level, and if you have larger particle, then you need lower illumination, because larger particle will have larger surface area, it will scatter enough light even at low illumination level. Smaller particles will be difficult to see, it will not scatter enough light. So, you need to increase the intensity of the light falling on it. If you make a larger particle, the problem is that the velocity lag will be more with larger particle. So, velocity lag will be more, but illumination will be less, illumination requirement will be less. So, low power laser is enough to illuminate. If you use very small particles, the velocity lag will be less, but the illumination level required will be more. So, you need high powered laser. So, these two things, size of the particle and illumination level, laser power, these are two things that need to be, that are mutually against each other and that need to be optimized. Okay. Then you see duration of the illumination pulse, that is also very important. If you make one pulse, how long should be that pulse? So, first is that this is also a matter of optimization. If your pulse is too short, the scattering will be less, but if the pulse is too long, then what will happen? The particle, instead of being a dot, it will be a line, right. You must have seen that when you have a camera and your object is moving, you do not get a clear picture. If I am moving a hand, you will get a hand which is from here to here. You must have seen this in the real life. So, if the duration of the illumination pulse is really large, you will not see a frozen picture, you will see a blurred picture, and that is of no use. Okay. So, duration of illumination pulse also need to be optimized. Then the time delay between the two illumination pulses is also important. If the time delay is too short, then the particle will not move enough distance. If the time delay between the two pulses is very large, it is possible that the particle will move out of plane and you will lose it, right. You will not be able to capture the image in the second frame. So, that data will also be useless. Then you see density of the images of the tracer particles in PIV recording. You are doing PIV recording, how many particles per square centimeter? So, the density is basically based on density, the PIV is divided into 3 sections. One is called low image density, the other one is called medium image density, and the third one is called high density image. Low image density means there are very small number of particles which you even identify by eye. By naked eyes you can, if you look at the recordings, you will be able to identify this is particle A, this is particle A, this is particle B, this is mode C, D, you can identify very small number of particles. This is called particle tracking velocimetry. You can track the particle without the need of any specialized software manually, that is called particle tracking velocity. Medium image density, where the particle numbers are more, say few hundreds, but still you can't do it manually. And high image density is called laser speckle velocimetry. Laser speckle velocimetry means the particle density is so high that particle also almost seem merged to each other. That is called laser speckle velocimetry, LSV, and this can only be interrogated using computer. Okay. Then number of illuminations per recording. So sometimes what you do is you can have one illumination which is long enough and take 2 cameras images. Sometimes you have 2 illuminations and 2 images. Then number of components of the velocity vectors. I told you that if you use one camera, you can only capture 2 components, x and y. I showed you, you can capture x direction velocity and y direction velocity. If you use 2 cameras, you can capture 3 dimensional. So this, if you use one camera, it is 2D PIV or 2C PIV, 2 dimensional or 2 component PIV. If you use 2 cameras, this is 3C or 3D PIV, 3 component or 3 dimensional, same thing. Okay. Then extension of the observation volume. This is one very interesting aspect of the PIV. Suppose you have captured the image here and you want to understand the flow outside this image, then what you can do is you can look at the trend, velocity trend here, and then you can do the extrapolation for understanding the flow. So this is called observation in extension of the observation volume. Similarly, you can do extension in time. Both are possible in the PIV recording because you capture sufficient past history. Based on that, you can extend the volume, you can extend the time. And then I also told you that size of the interrogation area, you can interrogate whatever size you want, whatever location you want, and next day if you want to look at something else again, you do not need to do the experiment. It is a big convenience because if you are using hot wire anemometry, then you do not have that flexibility. If you want another area, you do the experiment again. Okay. So this is a big convenience using PIV. So these are some of the general aspects of PIV. If you have understood it, you have understood PIV quite well. PIV and how to take the measurements. And also I would like to discuss one particular case study of application of PIV into engine systems. So one of the first things that you have to understand is that when we want to do PIV, normally the laser beam that comes out of a laser head is cylindrical in shape. And when we want to use PIV for illumination of any flow field inside an IC engines or in general flow measurement systems, we have to make a thin sheet which can illuminate a particular plane. So that means the first challenge that we have is that this cylindrical beam should be converted to a very thin sheet which is about somewhere between half millimeter to 1 millimeter thick, and it has a reasonable wide geometrical spread. That means it should cover a reasonable amount of interrogation area. And so before I discuss the geometrical configurations, I would just first like to discuss what is a laser. So laser, you all know what is a laser. So laser, basically if you look at the hardware of the laser, it has 3 main components. One is the set of mirrors that you can see here, mirrors and prism. There is one mirror, there is one prism here, and there is a laser material. Okay. And what you really are doing is you are supplying some kind of pumping energy. Now this pumping energy can be supplied in different ways. It could be supplied by heat, it could be another laser, it could be some chemical energy, it could be just light energy.
So, basically what you are doing is that you are exciting this material, and once the material gets excited. So, what is happening here is that you have a material which has two electronic levels. Okay. So, this is lower electron level and this is higher electron level. So, when a photon is absorbed by the electron, what will happen? It will rise to the higher state, and once it reaches higher state. So, for example, there is a photon whose energy is equivalent to the difference in these two photonic states. So, then this electron will actually move to higher energy state. But for this to happen, what is important is that the difference in the energy levels of this higher state and the lower state E2 minus E1 has to be equal to the energy of the photon, which is h nu. Okay. So, once the photon reaches to higher energy state, as we know that any in the nature everything likes to be in the lowest energy format, right. So, this higher energy electron would then like to come back to the lower energy state. So, when this E2, when it comes back to lower energy, it is going to emit a radiation which is going to be the wavelength of this radiation is going to be defined by the difference in the energy levels of these two states. Okay. But the problem is that this movement of the electron from the higher state to the lower state is spontaneous. That means it can happen now, or it can happen later, or 5 minutes later, nobody has any control. So, it is a spontaneous emission. But what you can do is that if you put another photon, so your electron is at higher state and you put another photon which is again having the same energy h nu. So, what that will do is that this will trigger, this will stimulate the emission of radiation. So, one photon is going here, and what it is doing is it is forcing this electron to come back to the natural state, and two photons get emitted, and the wavelength of these photonic radiations will be equal to the difference in the energy levels. Okay. And this is called stimulated emission, and here the emissions will be 2 h nu. Okay. So, same fundamental is used in the laser also. So, what you are doing is that this is the laser material, and by some way you are providing pumping energy. So, when you provide the pumping energy, some of the molecule reach higher energy state, then you are continue to provide energy, and that energy leads to stimulated emission of radiations, and those radiations move back and forth, and using this mirror and prism you direct them. The best part here is that since this energy level is fixed, so that means its nu is going to be fixed, its lambda is going to be fixed, and therefore the photons that you emit here will be monochromatic in nature, and since it will be monochromatic in nature, that is why it is called laser laser light, which is a single wavelength light. Okay. So, this is the basic principle. If you want to know more about in detail about how the laser works, you can pick up any physics book. There is a book by book on PIV by Marcus Raffel, that also you can refer for this. Okay. Now, there are many types of systems. So, what I have shown you here is basically a two-level system. Two-level systems are very impractical systems. In nature, really such kind of systems do not exist. What exists in nature is 3-level and 4-level systems. So, in these systems, what happens is that this is the ground state, and this is the upper laser state, and this is the pumping state. So, what happens is that when you pump energy which is higher than the upper energy state. So, the electron really moves into upper pump level, and from the pump level it undergoes non-radiative transition. That means it comes from the higher level to lower level, but without the emission of radiation, and from here to here the laser action takes place. That means the emission of radiation will take place. So, this you can see, this is E1 to E3 is the pump transition, this is non-radiative transition, and this is the laser action. and it depends on what kind of material you are taking, whether the laser will be a 3-level laser or 4-level laser system. There are some materials where the ground state is here and you pump, it goes to E4, and from the pump first it comes to E3, which is by undergoing non-radiative transition, and from here the laser action takes place, it comes to lower laser level from the upper level laser. So, from E3 to E2, upper laser level to lower laser level, it comes down and monochromatic light generation takes place here, and from E2 to E1 again there is non-radiative transition. Okay. So, there are many types of lasers. Okay. Laser material could be gas, for example helium neon lasers. Okay. These could be neodymium YAG laser, solid state laser, these are electronic materials, semiconductor based materials. There could be ruby lasers, there could be dye lasers. So, many types of lasers are available, and each of these lasers have a particular wavelength, or some of the lasers are also available in multiple wavelengths. For example, most frequently we use neodymium YAG laser. Neodymium YAG laser has a wavelength of 1064 nanometer, and you know that our eye can detect the radiations between 300 to 700 nanometer. That means the laser is actually invisible laser, you won't be able to see the laser. Okay. So, that also is used for a lot of applications. So, what is done is that you put a frequency doubling mechanism, and by doing the frequency doubling mechanism you actually convert the neodymium YAG to frequency double neodymium YAG, and the frequency, the wavelength of the neodymium YAG from 1064 reduces to 532 nanometer. Okay. 532 incidentally falls in green laser range. So, neodymium YAG laser that you will probably see in the Indian Research Lab that is used for PIV investigations is basically a frequency double neodymium YAG laser. Also, you know, there are several criteria based on which you can actually classify the different types of lasers. One is depending on the material, then the power range, then whether the laser is continuous or it is basically pulse laser. Pulse laser means there will be laser action for some time, and then there will be a gap, and again there will be laser pulse. Okay. Continuous wave means the laser pulse is coming out continuously. Okay. So, there are many classifications. Unfortunately, due to paucity of time I cannot go through all in this course, but you are welcome to study this from the book on Marcus Raffel. Much of the information is given there. Coming to the next part, that once you have sorted out the laser, the second thing is that once you put the laser through any medium, you can't see the fluid. For example, if you are interested in studying IC engines, what is the working fluid? The working fluid over there is air. Air you can't see. So, you have to see, you have to put something in the air which you can actually capture on a photographic film, which you can see, and for that different types of seeding materials are used for seeding the flow. Sometimes, you know, PIV is also used for seeding liquid flows rather than gas flows. So, gas flows also are seeded, liquid flows are also seeded, and there are very many types of systems or materials that are used for seeding the flows. For example, if you are having a gas flow, you can use air jets, condensation generators. So, condensation generator really means that you put a vapor of a particular low boiling point fluid in a airstream. So, now the air will mix with the vapors of the low boiling point fluid, and in the test section you reduce the temperature to a level where that vapors will start condensing. So, once the vapor starts condensing, it will form tiny droplets, and those tiny droplets you can get illuminated by laser or light, and then you can capture them on the photographic films. So, this is condensation generator. There are atomizers. Atomizers are nothing but just like injectors, you know. You have high pressure fluid passing through a small nozzle, it atomizes, and then the liquid in very small droplets is injected into the airstream. Then, you know, smoke generators. So, smoke generator is nothing but something very similar to धूप बत्ती और अगरबत्ती, scent sticks. Scent sticks, what if you are able to see the smoke coming out of scent sticks? Why? Because the smoke that is coming out just does not contain only the gas, because if it is gas you will not be able to see anything. It also contains some small particles, okay, and these could be of different materials depending on what is the starting material, okay, and these are these small particles that you see. So, if you have a flow and you put some kind of a smoke generator and put the smoke, you will actually put seeding material in the flow. Then there is something called Laskin nozzle generator. This is also some kind of a atomizer. So, basically this is something that you should read from Marcus Raffel book, and in fact I would request you, this is a homework for you, to read Laskin generator. What is a Laskin generator and how does it work? Okay. So, let me just give you a briefly, it's a vessel which contains a liquid, and then what you are doing is that you are putting pressurized air through it. So, air will bubble out through some holes, and then on the top when it gets collected it will have some particles, and then you take an exit from there. And of course, you do not allow bigger particles to go out, and you also control the pressure in order to control the size. So, this is just the basics of it, but I would expect that you read it from the book by Marcus Raffel working of this. If you look at the materials for seeding the liquid flows, there are many materials that are used for seeding the flows. Again, this is a non-IC engine application, because we never use IC engine liquid flow for engine investigations, but just for the sake of completeness, if you are investigating liquid flows for some reason, you could seed it by solid materials, you could seed it by liquid materials, or you could seed it by even gases. So, among the solids you can put polystyrene globules, aluminum dust size 2 to 7 micron. Polystyrene is, you know, it is a very light fluffy material, and it is very light. So, you can actually go for higher diameters, 110 to 100 microns. Glass spheres, these are hollow glass spheres, okay. So, these are also very light material, 0 to 100 micron is the size. Then there are different types of synthetic coating granules, these are also extremely light materials. So, 10 to 500 micron size, and just to put things in perspective, the size of your hair is somewhere between 50 to 100 micron. If you have very nice silky hair, it could be 50 micron. If you have something as thick as mine, it could be 100 micron. Okay. So, that is the dimension of this, of the particles that you are going to put. You can use different types of oils. For example, if you are having water flow, you can put olive oil droplet. Olive oil and water do not mix. So, you can put different oil droplets, and these oil droplets can be large, and since they do not mix, you will be able to see them, because there will be difference in their refractive index. You can also seed the liquids with oxygen bubbles. You must have seen aquariums, right? So, that we bubble the air, then you can clearly see the flow of water. So, similarly, you can put oxygen bubbles, and these bubbles obviously will be very large in size. So, they could be up to 1 millimeter size. Okay. So, these are for seeding the liquid flows. If it comes to gaseous flows, which we are interested in for IC engine applications, you can actually put solids. Now, this is for gas flows, not necessarily engine flows. Okay. Polystyrene you can put for gas flows, aluminum dust you can put, but not in engines. Okay. Engines, because you have a working machine, there are very nice, very small tolerances. So, if you put aluminum dust, it is going to spoil the engine. Magnesium powder also you can use, glass micro balloons you can use, granules for synthetic coating you can use, diclythalate is also you can use. So, none of this is actually used in the engines. So, when it comes to putting seeding material, solid seeding material in the engines for engine applications, two things we prefer. One is that we put graphite particles, okay, Now, graphite particles are also very, very small, 5 to 50 micron sizes are available in the market. You can buy them and you can put them in the engine, and it is a soft material. So, this is not going to cause wear inside the engine, especially in the optical part. And then the other part is that graphite is nothing but just carbon. So, when the combustion takes place, it is going to burn it away. So, this material is not going to get accumulated in the engines, and that is why it is not going to adversely affect the engine. Okay. You can also put smoke, and this also you can use in the engine. Smoke also you generate some carbonaceous particles of very small size. So, you can in the engines we also use different types of oils, for example olive oils. Okay. So, olive oil is also something that you can use for seeding the engine flows using Laskin generator. Okay. Now, you have to also understand, many of you will be doing research related to PIV. You have to understand that if you have an open system, for example, there is a flow test section here, you are taking the air from the ambient and putting the air in the ambient, then what will happen if you are putting a material which is not so good for health, then those particles will be in the air and you are going to inhale them, and what that will do, it is going to be not so good for your health. Okay. So, if you are having an open loop system or versus you are having a closed loop system, the choice of the material becomes extremely important, and you should not you should choose a material which is health point of view, it should be benign, it should not be adversely affecting the health. You know, sometimes for seeding the gas flows, we also use titanium dioxide powders. In fact, in our department, titanium dioxide powders are very frequently used for PIV investigations, particularly for gas flows. So, TiO2 you should have a closed circuit, otherwise this is going to be a problem.